Podcast with hosts Andrew Clark and Chris Emery. This is designed to be a discussion on all things life and faith. We hope this serves as a weekly resource and encouragement to you.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Bayview Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Andrew, joined, as always, by Mr. Chris Emery. How are you?
Good day, good afternoon. I'm awesome. Excited to be here. Excited to be with everybody. Need to clarify, I'm not drinking Mountain Dew. For all of you out there like, he's a dew drinker. I'm not. No, this is a sugar-free, healthy energy drink. So
I respect it.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I just need that little pep today.
Yeah.
Time change, man. It is wearing me out.
Yeah. My kids got up earlier. I don't know why. I don't like even like the Sunday, you know how it jumps from like 6 to 7, like so when it's like 6 a.m. It's actually 7
a.m. Yeah.
It feels like 6 still. They got up at 5.
Which was really 4.
Yeah, and I'm just like, what is why are you guys like this? So
that's crazy. You would think you'd naturally sleep in, but you don't. Seriously, I don't usually even set an alarm because I just wake up.
Yeah.
I just always have. Sunday morning, I thought, or going to bed Saturday night, it's like, I'm pretty whooped. I got to get up, got church tomorrow. I'm going to set an alarm.
Yeah.
And no lie, dude, that alarm, I don't know how long it was going off. I was out.
Yeah.
I really believe if that alarm had not gone off, I would not have made it in time for our first production meeting Sunday.
Just gone.
I just would have been gone. I actually did that one year. My first year we lived in New York. We had just moved from Indiana, which at the time did not do time change.
Mm.
And so we get to our first, I guess it would have been this. I guess it would have been spring forward.
Okay.
Because I woke up, got around, showered, rolled on in. Church was started.
That's crazy.
And I was like, what's happening? I'm an hour early. And like, dude, there's a time change. Like, I totally forgot.
What? No one backed you up? No one messaged you? No one?
Well, this was before we had cell phones, but this was before social media.
Sure.
And so it wasn't like I'm seeing Facebook posts, time change.
Yeah.
It just was, there was a gap, and I slipped right through it and slept right through it. And yeah, so it was pretty epic. My boss was super cool. He laughed it off. It was cool. It was funny, but yeah. So I know that we all take some time to adjust, but yeah, this was wearing me out.
Yeah, you can feel it.
Yep, it's good.
Yeah,
but it's good. Hey, I'm loving this series already. We're 2 weeks into the wilderness, and just loved where we started things 2 weeks ago. And now we're kind of grinding into those topics of like in the wilderness, what are the things we need to be aware of, or maybe things we need to deal with?
Yeah. It's kind of the stuff that some weeks, coming up will be very much like tools, like how to respond to things. But I think like this week where you talked about temptations, it's like, what are some of the what are the things that be aware of? Where like you're going to be tempted in the wilderness or not, but it's almost like it can become heightened. Yeah. In that experience. And we see that with Jesus. He's in the wilderness, and that's where he's tempted by the devil and by Satan. And so, that was a really cool breakdown. Give us kind of your 3 points here up front, and then we'll take a couple moments and just describe.
Yeah, so of course we see the story Jesus, the Spirit leads Jesus into the wilderness. Mm-hmm. And while he's there, and I agree with you, like we're tempted in and out, but when we're in the wilderness, we're typically weaker. Our defenses are down. We're more vulnerable. And I think that's where we find Jesus in his humanness. And so he's tempted basically to turn rocks into bread, to throw himself off the cliff and force God to save him. And then he's offered all the kingdoms of the world. Yeah. And so what we find is we actually find those temptations kind of summarized for us in 1 John. So let me read that real quick. 1 John 2:16 says, "For the world offers only craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and pride in our achievements and possessions." So this is kind of a general, repeat summary of what Jesus went through. So we have him saying, the first one we have Satan say, "Jesus, I know you're hungry, so turn these rocks into bread." And he uses scripture against Jesus, right? Yep. And so now we're seeing that Jesus is tempted to feed his desires, to feed his pleasures.
Yeah.
Next thing, I'm going to show you take you to the top of the temple, throw yourself off. The scripture says God has to save you.
Yeah.
So this is really that temptation to force God to do it my way.
Mm-hmm.
So my will over God's will. And then the last one, of course, is he says, here's all the kingdoms of the world. I'll give all this to you if you kneel to me now.
Yeah.
And it's really this temptation, and I don't think we say it this way often, but I think this is exactly what it is. It's the temptation to live for my glory and not God's. Because my glory means I'm getting rewarded now.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what we see happening there. And the reality is, as I was reading through this and preparing, is like, wow, I've been in the wilderness. You've certainly been in the wilderness. Those are all very real.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think, especially when you talk about like my desires, I thought the next two are really, I thought it was all just excellent. But that my desires, that idea of like, yeah, there's things that I've just wanted. Or I've thought like, I think I've always framed it through the lens of I need it. I think that's where temptation gets us, is the thought of, oh, I need that. That's why social media, things like that work so well, because commercials, everything frames it in, if you don't have this, you're missing out, and you need it. And it's, for Jesus, it's like, yeah, you're obviously hungry. Like, you need to eat. Yeah. Like go. Like, it's, I think we would read that, and if we're honest, we're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like, Jesus, you're hungry, go do it. But in the end, when that's really that temptation to really just put maybe something on a pedestal, maybe it's to make something the most important thing in your life it's not supposed to be, or this almost like, I just need it. Yeah. That's what I keep coming back to.
It almost feels like we're kind of bumping up against this misplaced concept that, well, if it makes you happy, do it.
Yeah, that's good. Yep.
So, you're hungry? Well, then eat. Thirsty, drink.
Yep.
Stressed out, get drunk.
Yep.
Lonely, make poor decisions.
Yep.
I mean, sacrifice your standards, whatever it may be. The list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
How many addictions and habits and destruction is in our lives because it started with us fueling and feeding our pleasures.
Yeah. Yeah, if we feel like there's something missing, so fulfill it.
Yeah.
Go fill that hole. Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's throughout the Bible of the grind, the inner conflict between fleshly desires or worldly desires and godly desires. And that's what, Galatians is that great exhaustive list of like, well, this is what your desires look like, idolatry, adultery, envy, drunkenness, jealousy, quarreling, fight. You just list, it's pretty much an exhaustive list of every mistake I've made in my life, right?
Yeah.
And it's because, wow, those are the seasons I was feeding my desires.
Yeah.
And wanting that gratification right now.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, I just picture like the hole in your heart, but it's always shaped like something like that Reese's peanut butter cup or whatever. But it's like, yeah, just fill it. Just figure out a way to do it. And it's, again, I think the temptation side is always framed as in it's not that big of a deal. And that's how sin gets you, though. Like, that's what we talk about. It's like sin doesn't instantaneously make you go 100 miles an hour.
Right.
It's going to slowly take you there incrementally, inch by inch. And all of a sudden you're going to look around and be like, how did I get here? How did I drift all the way? Because we just keep following that little desire of like just a little more. Like you said, oh, I'm lonely. The text won't hurt. If I hung out with them, that won't hurt. And it just snowballs. And so there's, I think our temptations when it comes to our desires, it really quickly makes us put boundaries down.
I agree. And I don't think that there's a self-help path that we can say, hey, this is surefire. I think biblically the only way we see this, they're bring victory, I guess, or freedom from it is what we're told about just dying to self.
Yeah.
Dying to self. Jesus says, deny yourself daily, die to yourself, give up your way daily. Galatians 2:20 says, my old self has been crucified. And I think that that's a big part, not necessarily part of salvation. I think it's part of post-salvation early surrender. That early following of Jesus. Because, we get saved, we're forgiven. That's where so many people, I think, stop. And that actually kind of leads us to some of these other paths is, well, I'm forgiven now. I'm good. Yeah. I'm going to heaven. Let's go, And part of that is like, well, I mean, I still want what I want, though. And I see so many people blending the old and the new. Yeah,
that becomes a get out of jail free card.
Yeah, a little bit.
And it's like when you really break down what salvation is and what Christ did for us and his death on the cross and that whole thing, it should actually push us more towards I don't want to take advantage of that. Like that, but I don't think because of sin and because of the fallen nature of us as humans, we can't fully comprehend all that he really did.
Yeah.
But that's part of, I think, walking out our faith and being a follower of him is really that pursuit of truly understanding the mercy and the grace that he showed to us. And so that we don't want to take advantage of it. It shouldn't be this, well, I could just go do it because I'll be forgiven, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you're not wrong, but that's not the right heart posture.
Well, it takes the religious duty out of it. So we're not doing anything because we have to anymore. And so it becomes a desire. And I think that's kind of what's being said. There's a controversial statement I've heard said a couple times. I've maybe said it before, of a person fully committed to Jesus Christ with their life can genuinely do whatever they want to do. And at face value, you're like, wait a second, is that like saying that I can just do whatever I want because he'll forgive me? No, what it's saying is if you're fully surrendered and following Jesus Christ, you can do whatever you want to do because what you desire is in line with what God desires for you.
Yeah.
So it changes my desires. Now my desire is not to give me pleasure now. My desire is to glorify God with my thoughts and my words and my choices, to glorify God with my relationships and my workplace and my school place. Now everything I do is driven by the desire to, like, hey, I just want to do it for you.
Yeah. That's good.
And that shifts the entire parameter, because if I do something because I have to, I'll do the bare minimum.
Yep.
But if I want to do something, well, I'm going to do it all the way.
Yeah. And that probably leads into even your second point of temptation, where it's like we're kind of you stop desiring to force God's hand in things.
Exactly.
And it's like you're really beginning to like see it from the lens of, okay, God, what do you have for me? And I don't understand your timing. I can't see 2 steps ahead like I wish I could.
Right.
But I'm going to follow you. And I think that's, for me, that was my takeaway. Like it's truly being a follower of Jesus versus kind of forcing. And I think you said like go sit in the corner and just wait for me and I'll let you know what I need. And GPS only to a certain extent, almost like.
Well, that's really what's happening there with Satan saying, hey, throw yourself off, because the Bible says this, that he will not let you hit your toe on a stone. And I mean, how many of us have done that in our walk? Like, right? Like, hey, I really want this for my life. And God, here's the promises you've said. So I'm going to force your hand to do it my way. And that's, man, we're trying to manipulate God to follow our path. And that's so common. And again, I have done that. I know I have. And that's what Satan's trying to get Jesus to do, is like, hey, just test him. Watch this. You're gonna force his hand. And Jesus like, yeah, we don't do that. And and that's us wanting our way.
Yeah, that's good.
And so, I use that analogy of this last summer learning to wake surf. And that really was, those of you that know what wake surfing is, it's on a surfboard behind a boat. But there comes that moment where they say, now throw the rope and just don't be. The weird thing for me was trying to figure out, because I'm not a science guy, and I know there's the physics and force of the water. The rope is my only connection to the boat. Yeah. So you're telling me if I throw this rope, somehow this surfboard is going to magically follow the boat. Obviously, it's riding the wake of the boat, but that was that moment of trust, right? Like, well, you tell me it's going to work, but is it really going to work? Yeah. And I think that's where so many of us are with following God. In fact, I would dare say this might be the biggest gathering place of people who are saved and haven't fully experienced God, is they're in this realm right here.
Yeah, that's good.
They're experiencing enough of God to know he's good. Yeah. They're experiencing enough of God to know he's faithful, but they're still holding the rope, and they're not getting the full experience of being surrendered. Yeah. I mean, I bet there's people that live their entire life that way.
Yeah, very true. It's like the forsaking their first love type thing. My mind jumps to the 4 chairs message.
Adrian Dupre, little shout out AD.
But that second chair living of just like, you're not necessarily questioning your faith. But we are questioning, like, are you really taking it serious? Have you fully sold out for it? Do you remember what it was like to fall in love and to be completely devoted? And now you're just kind of going through the motions of it. Yeah. Side note, wake surfing. My father-in-law, Tom, who's been on this podcast a couple times, he's like 60, maybe a little older. Yeah. Dude's had surgery on both rotator cuffs, ankles, all that stuff. We go wake surfing a couple years ago. I'm dying. But I'm like, I'm athletic. Like I can do this. I could not. Tom gets out there, stands up within 2 seconds, throws the rope. He's like, is this how I'm supposed to do this? Like the most nonchalant, crushes it.
That doesn't surprise me at all because he jumps out of planes and
I'm just
and
like,
does
okay,
all
whatever,
kinds of
dude.
crazy stuff around the world. So
whatever.
You're also a ball of lead.
Yeah, no, I sink really quick.
I was gonna say you're dense. Like I could see, like that's a big pull on that boat.
Yeah, that board's stressing under me. Yeah.
That rope's like I'm out.
Yeah, the rope let go of the boat for me. So, anyway, sorry, that was just
side note.
Just think of that, but I think you're right. I think a lot of us do live in this space.
Yeah,
where it's like I do trust God to a point, but I still think I can do it better.
I almost feel like it's, for a lot of Christians, a lot of followers of Jesus, there's this place where they're not doubting God's ability.
Mm-hmm.
So they're living a place like, no, I believe God can do all these things. I believe that God did say all these promises. It's not questioning his ability. It really comes down to I'm questioning his faithfulness. Not can he do this, but will he?
Will he? Yeah.
Because for me, it was like, okay, do I believe what they're telling me is true, that if I throw the rope, it'll work? Well, I believed it was true because I'd already watched them do it.
Yeah.
So I knew what they were saying. I knew it could, but there's that moment of real release where it's like, okay, but now's the rubber meets the road of like, will it work? Yeah. Will this work? And I find so many people, that's where they live. They're stopped right there of like, okay, I know God, I know I can trust him. I know he can do all these things. But I don't know that I can trust him with my career.
Yeah.
I don't know if he really will take care of my family. I don't know really if I make this big life decision, I don't know if he really does have a plan, right? I mean, there's so many things that we just hold the rope on.
Yeah.
And we, as many of you know, you can experience a pretty good portion of God that way, holding the rope. You can experience a lot of great things. He loves you. You're experiencing his forgiveness. But what if there's more?
Yeah.
What is a whole different level of experience?
Yeah.
And I think that's the big part.
Yeah. But that's a big step to fully trust. And I think that's where, I think you said it, I think that's where people get stuck is, man, I know what scripture says. I know, but it's like, I've been hurt. So I'm going to assume I'm going to get hurt here too.
Yeah.
And we kind of associate the two, and it's like, no, it's a little different.
Yeah, it's very different. I would encourage you. I mean, I love the verse out of Psalms 34 where it says, "Taste of the Lord and know that He is good." And that verse always kind of apply. Like I kind of always gravitated to that verse because, like, I'm a foodie. I love food. I love trying new things.
Yeah.
I love and sometimes you taste something, you're like, oh, that I can't. I got to have that again.
Yeah.
You know, last night my wife and I made some steaks for dinner, and there's this garlic mustard steak sauce that my brother gave me the recipe 2 years ago. And I remember the first time he made it. And it's garlic, it's butter, it's Worcestershire sauce, and spicy mustard. That's all it is. The first time I tasted it, I'm like, I'm just going to drink the cup of this. I don't even need the steak. Like, I tasted of it. It was good. It's funny. I think we eat steak now only for a reason to have that sauce. Like, it could be bad steak.
Like
I don't even
steak
care.
With your sauce?
I don't even need a good steak. It's just give me that sauce and I'm ready to roll. I tasted it. It's so good. I want more. And I would encourage you that if you've never thrown the rope, so to speak, if you've never just given God a chance to show you who He is, do it. Do it and taste it.
And we'll talk about perspective, but I do think sometimes the wilderness experience almost takes the rope from us.
Yeah.
And I think we don't realize it.
I think you're
But
right.
like that's, we'll have some of those conversations down the road, but I think that's a big part too of just like, just try it. Just trust.
I agree. Last one, then it talks about Jesus given the opportunity to be given all the kingdoms of the world, even though He's already King of Kings, and Satan didn't actually own them. So I'm sure there was a chuckle there. Yeah. But there is this place where it's saying, all right, am I living for God's glory or am I living for my glory? And when we say living for my glory, it's what Jesus is talking about in Matthew 6. So in Matthew 6, Jesus says, go watch the Pharisees. They give to the poor in public so that everybody sees them do it.
Yeah.
They pray out loud screaming and everything for attention so that everybody sees them do it. They do all of these things in a way so that they get the glory now. And living for my glory means this. Am I living for the reward now, or do I trust that the reward he's offering in eternity is bigger, is greater? And I think that this is a place where a lot of people get hung up. I think that there's a lot of folks that are like, well, I do want to follow Jesus. I do want to be forgiven, clearly. I think I want to do what's right. I think people want to be good, moral people when they find Jesus. But I want all the good stuff now.
Yeah.
And I want the rewards now. And maybe it's not even, this doesn't even have to be accolades or people patting you on the back or having respect. That's a big part of it. But I think for some people, it's like, yeah, but I don't want to sacrifice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like desires is like putting, like we said, our wants on a pedestal. You know, there's like putting our plans on a pedestal, and then really this one is like, are we just kind of putting ourselves up there?
Ooh, that's good.
Are
You're
we
right.
just like, are we really just saying like, I have to come first? And you know, I think you're right first that I gotta imagine Jesus chuckled. I got to, because I love all the interactions that he has where people kind of question or ask something of him. We've shared one of my favorite stories is when Lazarus dies and Jesus is there and they're freaking out on him, and he's just like, he cries too. He has all the emotion, but it's like, but dude knew, like he knew what was going to happen. So even in this interaction where it's like Satan's doing all this, he's like, yeah, bro, you don't got that power. Like, but that he still kind of goes with it as a teaching moment opportunity, I think is speaks to his heart and his character and the master teacher that he is. But
or how about when he shows up at Jairus' house and whose daughter has died, the wailers are there, the mourners are there, and he says, no, she's just sleeping, and they laugh at him. I know he was like, oh, this is gonna be so good.
Yes.
This is gonna be so good. You're laughing at me for real?
It is so wrong, but it's the David Blaine SNL skit or whatever where the guy's like, there's probably Cheez-Its in your cup right now, and he's like, what cheese? And okay, that's way off track, but just that idea if he just knows.
Yeah,
like,
he does.
Like, no, you're crazy. And he's like, no, just trust me.
Yeah,
like it's going to happen. But I do think that's that temptation is to say, just take it then. Here's like, I just want to, I think all those other temptations actually lead to this one of like, I just really need myself to be first.
Yeah.
My list of priorities, it's me, everything else.
That's actually really good. I like the image. Yeah, we're putting ourselves on the pedestal and not dying to self.
Yeah.
I read an article years ago with the title of it, and it was written to Christian leaders, and I think this really applies to those of us that find ourselves preaching on stage. But the title was "Quit Photobombing Jesus." And I was like, man, that's so good. And the whole article is money. Yeah. And it was really talking about how many pastors or leaders even are like, no, I want this to be about Jesus. And I want you to only know his name, but I need to be in that picture too.
Yeah.
And that's that photobomb moment, right? Of like, well, I really do want some of the glory.
Yeah.
And I think even taking some of the glory is taking all the glory.
Yeah.
And I think we have to find this place of like, if I'm fully surrendered in my desires, I'm fully surrendered in my way and my will. Yeah. Am I fully surrendered to the results that I experience now? Yeah. And maybe I don't get the rewards now. Maybe I don't. In fact, a lot of times we won't. Hebrews 11 says, lists all these people of faith. Is a lot of these people never saw the fulfillment of the promises this side of heaven. Yeah. Jesus says some people sow and will never reap. Yeah.
Think of Moses. Yeah, all that Moses did, and like we talked about the week one of just like talk about a guy who like fought for his people with God, like was like so in line with what God wanted. All the times he experienced God's presence and got to have all those conversations, all for it to end with him dying just outside the promised land. He never got to actually see what he was called to do, but that never deterred him, in my opinion, from like at least leading the people the way he was supposed to lead them.
He kept leading them even deep into the wilderness. And there's a lot of wilderness that we're going to be looking at out of those stories. I mean, this next week we're looking at the book of Numbers, which is just a really cool story. And and so just more opportunities to kind of dig in, because as we said Sunday, I think you've even said, like, this isn't an if we go into the wilderness. It's a when we go into the wilderness.
Yeah.
And whether your wilderness is driven by a loss, whether it's driven by disappointment, whether it's driven by shame, guilt, life circumstances, I mean, the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
And whether you've ever called it that or not, that is what it is.
Yeah. It's and I think, I have someone point out, like, well, I like going to the wilderness. They were referring to, like, I like going out in the woods.
Yeah.
And it's like, we keep saying this, I think there's this reality of, like, this can be a refining process if you will view it that way.
Yeah.
To where, like, the temptations you might experience might be, pruning something out of you.
Yeah.
And or this wilderness experience you have might be something where it's like it is leading you on the path of just trusting God more. And it might mean dying to self more.
Yeah.
So if we look at it that way, there can be good from
Yeah.
the wilderness that we're in.
Yeah. Yeah, there can be. But we're not talking about going camping.
No.
Or glamping. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the seasons where you're surviving moment by moment out in the middle of nowhere with no idea where you are. That's the wilderness.
Yeah.
And I think that there's opportunity here. The wilderness, as we read here, there are many times where God leads us into the wilderness, and it's always for our benefit.
Yeah.
It's always for us to grow and learn and experience Him.
Yeah.
But it's up to us.
Yeah.
So, awesome. Hey, thanks for being with us today, guys. Hopefully this is a little bit of encouragement in the middle of your week as we kind of we talk through this too, because we're grinding through different seasons of wilderness all the time. We'll be back here next week, going down the same path. If you have not done so, hit like or subscribe on whatever platform you are listening on or watching on so you don't miss an episode, because we are here each and every week. For today, it's Andrew, it's Chris. We're out of here. We'll see you next time around.